ones that we came across was the pub, the George and Dragon at High Wycombe, not far from the caves which have such a sinister reputation there. And the story that we were asked to film, which we did, concerned the haunted bedroom where Sookie the Barmaid had breathed her last. And the story that had been elaborated by the friends who told us the tradition of the George and Dragon was that round about 1750, 1760, the very, very attractive little barmaid named Sookie had decided that she would optimize the good looks with which she had been blessed and would become preferably the wife, but failing that, the mistress of somebody very, very rich. And so she decided that she would have nothing to do with the village boys, all of whom were pursuing her, and that she would wait until a suitably wealthy nobleman appeared and made her an offer she couldn't refuse. The village boys were very upset about this. You can hear what they were saying. Ideas above her station, what's the matter with us? You could just imagine the junta that was going around. And they hit upon a cunning plan. The cunning plan was that the most literate of them, who was in a small minority, would compose a letter to Sookie and would say, I am a very wealthy nobleman. You served me with the food and drink last time I was here. I'm totally captivated by your beauty. In fact, I wish to elope with you. Will you go up to the caves, get yourself a nice white dress that we can use for the wedding tomorrow, and we will run away tonight. And of course, poor Sookie fell for it. Up to the caves she went, wearing a lovely long white dress, which was going to be the wedding dress for tomorrow, she hoped, only to be met by a great crowd of the village boys, roaring with laughter and saying, what are you doing up here, Sookie? What, you got to meet somebody? And she realised that the whole thing was a very cruel joke. Embarrassed and hurt, she turned and ran back to the pub. She was a live-in member of staff, tripped as she was running down the slope from the cave, probably because of the dress, hit her head on a stone as she fell, was picked up unconscious, obviously far more badly injured than anybody realised, was taken back to the George and Dragon, taken up to her room. When the housekeeper came in the morning to see whether she was ready to start work, Sookie was dead. And it's her ghost that is supposed to be seen in the George and Dragon. Now, I was filming in the room from which all the ghost reports had come. Didn't see her, but the cameraman, sound man, and myself all saw something very odd. The chandelier in that room suddenly started to swing 3-4 inches each way. There was no draft. Nobody had hit it with anything. It just suddenly, as if it was Sookie saying, hi guys, I'm here, you can't see me, but I can move the chandelier. The number of witnesses who've reported either seeing or hearing her over the last 100 years or so is very considerable. But as one of my ghost researcher pals never ceases to say, why is it that so many reports of paranormal entities are based on haunted pubs? Are the spirits of both kinds linked? Do they correlate? But I can assure you, hand on heart, I hadn't had any, and I did see the chandelier moving. It wasn't, I mean, it may have been somebody heavy moving over on quiet feet in the room above. You know, there are 10,000 explanations for these things. One of the best of the stories that seem totally Halloweenish and spooky, like Sookie at the George and Dragon, is one that we had in Norfolk years ago, in the little place called Merton on the North Norfolk coast. there's a forest there, or a wood, a substantial wood. And again, the number of good, honest, trustworthy, sensible witnesses who came up with reports that they had seen ghostly figures, patches of moving light weaving their way between the trees in the woods. And human nature being what it is, which is why we did call our university course that I ran the psychology and sociology of unexplained phenomena. We tried to look at some of the reasons why certain stories had become popular, and why curious elaborations had been woven around things that the reporters had seen. And the story was woven around these patches of moving light. Gypsies had abducted children and murdered them. And the patches of light were the terrified children trying to escape from the gypsies, and the larger patch of light was their mother looking for them. And so this very emotional story was woven around the patches of moving light. And then some academic meteorologists came to the rescue of common sense. They looked to see particularly what the cloud type and cloud level was when the misty lights moved around in the wood. And it was finally sussed out as a lighthouse beam nearly 20 miles away. If you imagine that where the fairy lights hang on that central beam is 10 miles from a lighthouse in my corner, and that the wood is over there where the Happy Halloween is on the screen, that's another 9 or 10 miles. And where the fairy lights are hanging, this is the cloud level, has to be exactly right, to within a few feet, and it has to be of a particularly reflective nature to make it work. And of course, here's the good old lighthouse beam rotating, hits the cloud layer, deflects down into the wood, and as this rotates, provided there's enough mist in the wood, all the sinister, eerie figures move through the trees. And the completely hypothetical story of the murdered children is built up around that meteorological phenomenon. But that reminds me of the Sookie at the George and Dragon story, where had we but known, some large powerful gentleman with either just his socks or a pair of soft slippers was walking over what was his floor and our ceiling, and our chandelier was doing this when the big guy took steps. But to the camera crew and the sound engineer and me, as the presenter of that little piece, we had, "Hey man, it's moving!" "Wow, what have we got here?" And so that was the tale there. The next one that I'd like to share with you is Bristol. And when you think about exorcisms, you tend to think that it's going to be somewhere like a ruined castle or an old manor house or something with a history, with a traditional sort of spooky setting, atmospheric. This was the Odeon Cinema. And a young usher had been so terrified of something he thought was in there that he'd given up his job. Now, we weren't in the middle of the recession then, but you don't chuck up a good job with the Odeon Cinema Company for no reason. And he maintained that there was something in there, some dark, evil, psychic force that was attacking him, and asked me if I would go down and exorcise the corridor where it happened. Now, I almost never see or hear anything. I have to have a good medium with me if I'm going somewhere like this and I want to investigate it seriously. I've got a very trusted friend who's a qualified nurse, and she's also got a law degree. She's a very sensible girl, and she's highly talented and perceptive as a medium. So what Bremner says, you can believe. She's telling you what she's really seeing, and she's not making it up as a load of codswallop. And so I took her along with me. We asked as many of the questions as you do, and to see if there was any history to the cinema. Apparently in 1946 or 7, not long after the war, a manager had been shot dead in his office. Somebody had just opened his door and bang, and gone. Never solved. So I thought, well, this could be a psychic trigger for some sort of paranormal phenomena in the cinema. But that was all that we could learn about the history of the place that might have had a bearing on what was upsetting this young fella. So Bremner and I, with him, I said, look, show us the place where you feel you're being attacked. We went into one of the corridors. He said, it's here, Father, it's here. This is where it gets to me. And then quite suddenly clutches his stomach and said, they're attacking me, and slides down the wall, finishing up at my feet in a sort of fetal position. And Bremner, I said, can you see anything? What's happening? And she said, I don't know how to describe them, but they're like psychic piranha fish, and they're all over him. And I said, there, where? She said, there. So producing the holy water and doing the prayer of exorcism, and I always end it with the wonderful words of St. Columba. You know, that's the tale of Columba at Loch Ness. A poor fisherman had lost his boat. It was drifting out into the loch, and without it he couldn't earn his living. Columba said to one of his young monks, who was very athletic and powerful swimmer, can you go out there and fetch it? And the young monk set off across the loch to retrieve the poor fisherman's boat. And suddenly, according to the story, something with humps began moving towards the brave young monk. Whereupon Columba, no coward, plunges into the water himself, points at the thing, whatever, and shouts in a voice that must have terrified it, touch not thou that man, in the name of God, be gone! And Humps turned around and went off in the opposite direction. As they do. And so I used that prayer of Columba's when I was trying to get rid of whatever it was that my medium friend said was attacking the young usher. And I sprinkled holy water where she directed me, and suddenly there was a change in the atmosphere. It had been quite fetid and unpleasant. It suddenly changed to, you know, the stuff they can put through an air conditioner and it comes out like pine disinfectant at the other end. There was a smell as of a beautiful pine wood. And the lad who had been on the floor gets up, dusts his stomach down as if he's been in mud or dust, and says, wow, they've gone. That feels better. And Bremner, my medium friend, said, they are streaking off down the corridor as fast as they can go. They are terrified. I don't mean of me, but of the prayer and the holy water. They'd gone. Now, I don't know whether that was some purely psychological factor, whether the poor boy, having heard about the unsolved murder and being a very sensitive lad, felt that there was some dark, negative psychic force in the place and that he was susceptible to it. But I did trust Bremner's view, and I did, for myself, notice the difference in the atmosphere. It was a strange one, and it was in such a strange place. You know, you normally do exorcisms in ancient, haunted, crumbling ruins or spooky churchyards. But the Odeon Cinema at Bristol, not the sort of place you'd have thought. So, if I do a 30-second break there if anybody wants to get a drink, and then I'll hit the next one. Or are we all fine? Okay?
Going anywhere, I'm just going to sit.
I should be back.
Right.
I'm going to the loo.
So,
Too much tea.
I promised to put a few gaps in, and I'll carry on with the next one as any friends feel the need to get some rest. So we were up at 6 this morning, and I was doing a broadcast for BBC Liverpool at 8, and so I'm going to do my best as promised, because I believe in complying with the Trade Descriptions Act. And if it says Lionel Ghost Stories, then it's Lionel Ghost Stories, and I won't run. But coming back to that odd scent that we were very much aware of at Bristol, I was doing some research with a great pal of mine called Bob Snow, and Bob was secretary of the Ghost Club at the time, which, despite its rather fun name, is a very serious organisation who really does proper objective research. And Bob and I were on the so-called haunted staircase, hoping to get some indication that Matty was present. And you know, when you're at a party, or when you're at a lovely gathering like our convention, if somebody has got a pretty powerful aftershave and walks into that corner of a group of us, as he goes past you, you can, wow, that's potent, and then he walks off in the other, out the other corner, so you smell it getting closer, it reaches a maximum, and then it fades as he leaves the area where our group is sitting. And suddenly Bob turned to me and said, Lionel, lavender. I can smell lavender, and it's getting stronger. And it was so close that if you had had a piece of lavender between your finger and thumb and was just crushing it to get the perfume from it, it was as strong as that. And then it got fainter and finally vanished. And we looked at each other and said, it was as if something invisible, but drenched in powerful lavender perfume, had come past us on that staircase. Was it Matty on her way to take an invisible meal to the family that she had served 300 years ago? It's a strange tale. And I thought that after the experience in Bristol Odeon with the perfume, that was another strange one which involved a psychic scent rather than a sight or a sound. And I said that was Plankayak power. One that is a bit more involved, takes a little bit more telling, is the tale of Crogling Grange, sometimes called Crogling Low Hall. It's a favourite with my good friend here, yes?
Brilliant, I love this one.
Okay, well, I'll do it in the sort of 3 stages in which it comes. The story is in a book called The Story of My Life, the first account of it, The Story of My Life by Augustus Hare. And in the 1880s, one of the Hare ladies married one of the Fisher family in London. The Fishers having lived up in Crogling Grange, close to Penrith, up in the north of the Lake District. And when their business interests had taken them to London, the Fishers had put Crogling Grange up for rent. And a family named Cranswell had taken it on a 7-year lease. The family consisted of Amelia, who was the brains of the outfit and who was responsible for all their finance and housekeeping, and her 2 brothers, Ed, who was built like the proverbial brick outhouse, and young Mike, who was slimmer and more of a field athlete, but they were two strong young men. Now, they'd only been there a short while when Amelia, looking out of her bedroom window, and an important part of the story is that the bedrooms were all on the ground floor because Scarecrow Grange was a single-storey building. And as Amelia looked out of her bedroom window, she saw a thing described later as a scarecrow-like figure with gleaming red eyes moving towards her room. Understandably, she decided she'd like the company of her two brothers, please. But her room was locked. Not wanting to take her eyes off Chummy, who was approaching the bedroom window, she tries to unlock the door with her hands behind her. And of course, everything's then back to front. Consequently, the door remained locked and the key was on the floor. And there's poor Amelia trying to find the key while keeping an eye on the thing, whoever or whatever it is. It picks away the lead panes, puts its hand through, undoes the clasp, opens the window and climbs in and attacks Amelia quite savagely. She was badly bitten around the face and throat, and by the time her brothers had responded and smashed the door to get in, she was quite badly hurt. Seeing two strong men around protecting the girl, the other guy, whoever or whatever, disappeared out of the open window. When Amelia began to recover, she went off to Switzerland on doctor's orders to convalesce. And while they were there, this is where her business brain and her immense courage are so evident. She said to the boys, "We are not going to lose 6 years of a 7-year lease. It's expensive. We will plan what we're going to do next time. We're definitely going back to Croglan. And we are going to buy a pair of Swiss pistols, for which the Swiss were as famous as they were for their beautiful clocks and watches. And you boys will have one each. Mike, I want you in the room nearest the front door. Your door unlocked. If that thing returns, I want you out of the front door like a jackrabbit with your gun and shoot it. Ed, I want you and your muscle with me instantly, but the minute I scream, want you in the room opposite mine, doors open, and if I yell, Ed, I want you with me." Right. Boys both agreed, one gun each. And what makes the story particularly interesting in its detail is that these Swiss pistols came with matching ammunition, and the Swiss lead was a characteristic greeny grey, unlike the normal plain grey of the English pistol ammunition. So Amelia's plan was needed. The thing, whatever it was, decided to make another visit. The minute she saw it, she screams blue murder, and I said, Ed, who is built like the proverbial brick outhouse, is beside her in 10 seconds flat. Gun in hand, loaded and ready. The thing says, whoops, there's a big bloke in here and he looks mean. And it decided not to come after Amelia again. Meanwhile, second part of her plan was working brilliantly. Mike was out of the front door and shot it in the leg at almost point blank range. It screamed, it limped. Mike was keeping a sensible distance, remember he's not very big. And he knows what that thing did to his sister on his previous visit. So there's no mock heroics, he's not going to tackle it. He follows it. It crosses into a churchyard near the house, down into a vault, and the vault door shuts. Now young Mike is outside with an empty gun, and heaven alone knows what is inside. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't want it to escape, but neither is he going in after it. He wants a group of supporters with him. Nobody comes. Finally, he goes to summon help, and he comes back with Big Brother Ed and half a dozen grooms and ostlers and the village blacksmith. And you can almost imagine this is like the Hammer horror films, where you have rent-a-mob who go after Baron Frankenstein. And they're all, very well armed. And the Cranswell brothers and the most intrepid of their grooms open the door of the vault. There, on a raised dais in the centre, is an open coffin. The body inside it is dressed in the clothes of an earlier century and is almost totally decomposed. But there is fresh red blood on its hands and fresh red blood across the mouth. And they all say, "Vampire!" So, the vampire folklore being somewhat imperfect, but not totally unknown to them, they decide that the crossroads is the best place, so this unfortunate and, as we shall suggest in a minute, totally innocent corpse is taken to the crossroads, they chop the limbs off, they behead it, and they hammer a stake through it. While they're removing the limbs, one of them says, "Hey, there's a pistol ball in its leg." And Mike says, "Yeah, I shot him." And he looks at the ball and says, "That is the Swiss pistol lead that I used." So now they're totally convinced they've got a vampire. And there were no further attacks. Previously in Croglin, there had been problems. Other girls had been attacked, animals had been attacked. But now it had all ceased, which convinced them more than ever that they got the real vampire. I was doing this talk over in Lowestoft, and for their scientific society, and there was a charming young GP among the audience who said, "Lionel, I have an idea." And I said, "Come and share it with us." And he said, "Let us assume that the thing which attacked Amelia Cranswell was a normal human being, not a vampire, but was very seriously mentally ill, was totally deranged. And that he, like the famous guy in the New Testament who lived among the tombs, my name is Legion, and he had already made his base in that tomb not far from Scarecrow Grange. There was, suggested the doctor, there were a number of corpses in there from various periods in the past, and one of them, in a coffin with its top off, was largely decayed but still recognisable. And while the attacker, mentally ill attacker, is in the tomb, having just escaped from Mike Cranswell, who had put a bullet in his leg, thinks, "I don't know if there's anybody out there or not. I wonder." He manages to get, suggested the doctor, the pistol ball out of the flesh wound in his thigh, and he pokes it into the leg of the corpse. He then, no shortage of blood, it's pouring out of his leg. He puts it on the hands, he puts it on the mouth, he peeps around the door, and Mike Cranswell has gone to get help. There's nobody there. So he creeps away. And, suggested my young GP friend, 3 weeks later, the body of a pauper, of a vagrant, is found in a ditch 2 villages away down the road. Said the man had given himself gangrene, which had killed him. He'd handled an open wound, and he'd handled a decaying corpse, and infected himself fatally. Now, this is the third stage. where we went to investigate, because we love to get there on site and have a look and ask the people who live there and really get the data. When we arrived at Scarecrow Grange, it was 2 stories, not 1. That was the first disappointment. And the whole thing depended on having the bedrooms on the ground floor, single story. Oh, we thought, this is not good. Then we went to Scarecrow Village, 2 miles away. And the church had no vaults, was in fact relatively recent, and the only door leading anywhere was the door to the Victorian central heating underneath it. Low. So a man with a bullet in his leg would have been unable to escape 2 miles to the church with Mike Cranswell after him, shouting, "Help, help, there he goes." No chance at all. Well, we decided, lovely story, and the third thing that was wrong was the gun. If you and I had been summoned to help a lady who believed that the vampire was going to attack her, and guns were available if we hadn't got restrictions on buying them, there's no way I'm going to buy an old-fashioned single-shot pistol. I'm going to come after him with a big 44 Magnum revolver. If I miss him with the first one, I got 5 more shots.
Right.
So, the guns were wrong, the house was wrong, and the church and vault were wrong. Oh, we called on Mrs. Johnson, who was the farmer living there, and she said, "Oh, do come in, let me tell you all about it. This bricked up window is alleged to be the one through which the vampire entered the house." Right, we said, that's good. Ground floor window. And she said, "I'm not an architect, but I have a friend who is." And she pointed to some little bits that were sticking out at about midway. And she said, "My architect friend says that these things are corbels, and they are a sign that a roof has been lifted and an extra story has been added." Oh, we said, right. And then she said, "By the way, the piece of land there, which was only 30 yards from the house," said, "I can't plough that. There was a church there once, but Cromwell's men knocked it down." And she said, "Its foundations are still there. So the church has now come back beside the house where it needed to be. The house had once had only a single story. And then we get the period. And you solve the problem of the guns. Because when Augustus Hare's lady relative married Captain Fisher in London, and Augustus spoke to Captain Fisher at the wedding reception and got this marvellous tale, what he had not, I imagine the champagne had been going pretty well, what he had not understood was that Captain Fisher had actually said, "This is the vampire story that my grandmother told me, and it wasn't new when she was a girl." So we've now gone right back to the 17th century, hence the single-shot pistols, the church there before Cromwell knocked it down, and the roof hadn't been raised. So the Cromlin vampire comes and goes and comes back. And so I will suggest another little break there. If anybody wants either to get another drink or stretch his or her legs before I have a hammer at the next one. Otherwise, shall we say, it's now 11:05. If I do just a couple more, will that be okay for everybody?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Scared by that.
Right, okay. Well, I'll do just a couple more, and these are stories which I've been more or less involved at first hand, as we were at Cromlin, but we were in Rome doing some research for another program, and decided that now would be a good time to visit the tomb of Calixtus. the famous Catacombs of Calixtus, who worked there before he became Pope. So we duly got to the Catacombs to be met by the sad news that the English tour guide was unfortunately, the one who spoke English, was unfortunately away, but the French tour guide had kindly offered, if we could put up with his less than perfect English, rather than disappoint us and send us away, could we do with a Franco-English tour instead of no tour at all? So we said, yes, please. And that was where it was so fortunate for us as investigators, because he was a very nice bloke and very liberal-minded, because we'd gone to take photographs, and as soon as you get in, those of you who visited the Catacombs know immediately, no photographs, photograph it, défoncé, they photograph, and so on and so on. And we thought, blow it. And he'd taken us round on the first half of the tour, and it was extremely interesting. I thoroughly recommend it to all of my friends here. And then he said, I cannot give you permission to take the photographs, but I myself am going to have a little rest and a little drink from my flask. I will be 10 minutes. If any of you, he said, I shall not notice if I see a flash, I do not see things. So he said, I cannot give you permission, but I'm going round the corner, you do what the dickens you like. So to make sure we were not going to cause any undue problems, and you know, on the rectangular pattern in the Catacombs, the main group of our party had gone on around a second corner. Patricia had moved to a place where she could see me so I didn't get lost, because my navigation is not one of my strong points, especially in a labyrinthine catacomb. I could have been wandering about there for days. So she kept me in sight with looking this way, and she kept the main party in sight the other way. And I was going flash, 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 getting some wonderful shots, and suddenly a hand descends on my shoulder, and I thought, this is either a security man who's going to confiscate my camera, or, and I rather licked my lips at the thought, this is a mugger. And he's got the wrong bloke. I'm a third Dan martial arts instructor. This is going to be fun. I shall add him to the dead who are here already. You asked for my wallet, mate. I'll give you a one-way trip to the hospital. And it was neither a security man nor a criminal. When I moved a little bit to look at it, from the top of his pointed hat, which came all the way down to his shoulders, it was like a black triangle. You know, the kind of witches' hats that you wear in the masquerade. It was bigger than that, and it came down to sort of shoulder length. It was weird. It was a combination of a sort of hat and cloak design. Never seen anything like it before. And this strange triangular outline of the guy, it was very dark in there, but just came all the way down to the floor, and from the top of the pointed hat down to the floor must have been 7 feet. I mean, he may not have been more than 6'4" or 5, and then with a pointed bit on the top. And I suddenly realised, and as I normally have to have a medium with me, as I said, I don't see things. This thing, whatever it was not a human entity. I don't know what the devil it was. It wasn't evil, it didn't frighten me at all, it was just a surprise. But what are you? And it gradually shrank and faded. But for the next 2 days, you know how when we're examining anything strange, we sometimes get a peripheral vision of something. It's as if something's disappearing out of the corner of your eye. For the next couple of days, he was in the hotel room, as if he'd followed us in some... I never saw him at all. But when I last saw him, 2 days after the adventure in the Catacombs, he was only about 3 feet high, still in perfect proportion, as if he was fading and shrinking. as if the further he got from the catacombs, the less psychic power he had to make himself visible. Now, I can only tell you that that is absolutely true as I understood what was happening. That is, I can't tell you the thing was there, I can tell you that I thought it was there, I saw it, and I felt it. I felt that hand on my shoulder, looked round, and there was this weird thing, black triangle, almost like a gigantic inverted ice cream cone with, you know, sort of face slot looking at me, almost like a Ku Klux Klan hood, but in black instead of white. And the sensation I got was that he was curious. He wasn't malevolent. He basically wanted to know what I was doing there. It was almost, what are you doing in my sacred space? What are you up to? And again, it did just occur to me that there were priests in the Middle Ages and earlier part of whose sacred duties was the burial rites for the bodies laid to rest in the catacombs. Part of my work, I'm a volunteer priest, I'm a fully ordained Anglican priest, but in our church in Wales, we have a number of guys like me who do our church work for nothing. And we earn our living, well, doing what we do. And so we don't take a church house, we don't take a church. I've got a pal who, until he retired recently, was a priest and an optician. Another one was a priest and a pharmacist. Another colleague is a priest and a solicitor. And, well, I'm a priest and a broadcaster and writer and teacher. And we do our own thing. But I wondered, because I very frequently called on to conduct funerals, and I regard it as the most important part of a priest's work, that if you can help a bereaved family through that worst time, and if you can do your best to comfort them during the service, to let them have whatever they want during the service, and to pay tribute to their loved one, make the service personal for them, I give that my top priority in my priestly work. And I couldn't help wondering whether, because it is a large part of my clerical duties in our century, whether I had encountered a funeral priest from 1,000 years ago who sort of recognised me as a brother priest who also did what he did. It's just a thought that occurred to me. I can't justify it or rationalise it, but there was certainly something in that catacomb that was very curious about me and what I was doing there, and which it was the way the size diminished. It got weaker and weaker as I got further from the catacomb. And perhaps just to find one really entertaining and interesting one, it's one that's always appealed to me. Can I pass this to you, madam? And this one came from our very good friend. In fact, he was the priest who married us in 1957. His name was Canon Noel Boston, and he'd have been a wonderful guest speaker if he was still around, because he shared our interest in all things strange, paranormal, historical, and was altogether an all-round lovely bloke, and was extremely interested in the kind of stories that we've just been sharing. And one of his most interesting tales, not a horror at all, but a very interesting paranormal account, was of the monk in Norwich Cathedral, where he was an honorary canon and was very much concerned with the work of the cathedral and the cathedral funds. And there had been a number of reports from very reliable and honest clerical witnesses that they had seen the shadowy figure of a monk in the muniment room at the cathedral, and that he had apparently been on his knees with his fingers trying to get something out between two of the stone slabs, the tiles, in the floor of the muniment room. And Noel, our friend, said that there was a need for some building work to be carried out, which involved lifting the tiles. tiles were duly lifted, and one of the builders came running to the canon on duty and said, "Father, look what I've found between two of the tiles." And it was a silver groat, an old 4-pence piece, which was in wonderful mint condition because it had not had any wear, it had been down there. And it looked as if this dear old monk treasurer had lost it centuries ago and had felt dreadful about losing it because it was cathedral money he was entrusted with, as it were, you know, religious money that was supposed to do good things for the cathedral and for the poor that they were helping. And his mistake had lost, and 4 pence was a lot of money in those days, a silver coin. Anyway, it was then meeting of the cathedral authorities with dean and chapter. It was decided to offer it for sale to dealer, and it raised a wonderful amount of money. It was apparently quite an unusual one, and it was in such lovely condition. It raised, I think, well over £100, which was far more than anybody had hoped they could get for just one collector's coin. And once that money was in the cathedral treasury, the monk never came back. It was as though he was a purposeful entity, and he thought, "I will get that money to my cathedral if it takes me centuries." And so his spirit form, as Noel believed and as we believed, had come back to indicate, look, if you just move that, fellas, you can get that money out for the funds. Anyhow, my wonderful brothers and sisters, thank you for listening. I hope it's been what you were hoping for.
Yes.